Hello, everybody. I'm trying to gauge what kind of interest there would be in a Star Wars tabletop RPG series. So I've made a bit of a design document. That's what this video is. And I'll get into kind of everything involving what this series would look like. However, let me start with saying, what is a tabletop RPG for those who don't know? It's kind of like D&D, except in the Star Wars universe, this one is. And it's using a rule set from Fantasy Flight called Edge of the Empire, but I'll get into that in a moment because we've kind of expanded upon that. And generally speaking, it's an RPG played on a tabletop, as in you have pen and paper, you have dice, that kind of stuff. Stuff that a lot of people would deem fairly nerdy, but at the same time, it's a lot of freaking fun. And there's a lot of series popping up on YouTube and on Twitch for people who are doing it successfully and managing to create a experience that is very visual, yet the fact that the game, is not a very visual game. So I kind of wanted to go over how that would all look on the channel and just generally how it would work. So you guys can kind of get an idea of what I'm going for and whether or not you would be interested in that. So let's start with this poster that you're seeing on screen, because this was kind of the starting point of our game. And what you're seeing is I took like a ton of just character portraits, the ones that represent the characters when we're actually playing, but also, some of them were from Star Wars or SWTOR rather, and then others are just, from really good artists. But we threw it in, and this was kind of the starting point of our story, because the name Shadow of the Empire means actually quite a bit in our story, and this poster gave a good, ominous feel to what was going to happen. See, our game, despite that the rule set, dictates differently, our game takes place 4 to 5 years before the events of The Force Awakens. And the rule set, so Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny, and Edge of the Empire, those rule sets from Fantasy Flight, which are the books, they all take place before that. They take place in episodes 4, 5, and 6. So to have a game that's so far forward, despite the fact that Fantasy Flight just announced a Force Awakens rule set, they hadn't before. So we were already there, and we don't necessarily have the stats for specific weapons during the Force Awakens and stuff. So we had to make a lot of that up. And the name Shadow of the Empire is very relevant because that is where the galaxy is. So with the old Empire falling and the New Republic coming and trying to hunt down the Empire, the galaxy in those 30 years between episode 6, or 30 to 40 years between episode 6 and episode 7, is the galaxy is living within the shadow of the Empire. You have many planets that were controlled by the Empire that are now free from the New Republic, that have gone through and made them free. But they're still having the old ways of the Empire. There's still quite a few people who were a part of the Empire hiding out and living, though they're along in years. And there's ideals of the Empire that have long since faded, but are coming back in the form of the First Order. So the galaxy itself is in the shadow of the Empire, but the players themselves are too within the shadow of the Empire, because there's this looming force in our story, and that's the start of the First Order, and they're slowly gaining power. At first, they're just whispers of these, crazy dudes and zealots that are going out, stealing children, making them into stormtroopers and stuff, and that's been going on for a little bit of time, whereas the players themselves just learning about all of this, and then suddenly they become wanted by the First Order. So there's this struggle of they're under the shadow of the First Order as well. So Shadow of the Empire was just a name that worked really, really well. So our party is 5 players large. It was 6, but one of them, life came up and he wasn't able to do it on the times that we were playing anymore. We play once a week on Sunday nights. And life, happens. So he wasn't able to play anymore. But that doesn't mean that he won't show up later on. Maybe he'll rejoin when life becomes a little bit less chaotic. And our 5 players used to be 6, are they have like an established story already. And what I like about that is since we've been playing since January, there's stuff that's already happened. There's relationships that are formed. There's conflicts that have happened and stuff like that, which means you are getting a really good Star Wars experience if we do this series, because you're jumping in just like any other Star Wars story into the middle of a story. You're getting the credits rolling at the beginning with the music and everything, and it's giving you the backstory of what has happened, and then you're jumping right into it. And what I like about that is our characters already have formed bonds and everything, so it's easier to watch. It's not like that. If you've watched some series of like tabletop games on YouTube or on Twitch, some of them, they start from the beginning, and the unfortunate part about that is the players are still kind of getting to know their characters, and their characters are still trying to get to know other characters. So it's a weird way to start, but it is cool for, sometimes if you really want to enjoy that kind of thing. But our story has already progressed and has already happened, so you're jumping right into it just like any other Star Wars experience, and I like that a lot, especially because the characters are already fluent in their characters, and you really get the feel for how they are. In fact, this is actually very reminiscent of Critical Role. If you watch Critical Role, they all, started because they were already playing for a couple years, and you got like a really good start into that series because there was already, established history and stuff that have happened, and I like that a lot, and that would be the case for this series as well, considering it would be at least 4 months before we started, and we've already been playing for several months, so you kind of are jumping into it already. So let's introduce you to the party of characters. So we have, first we have Cookie, which is Cookie the Wookiee. I know. You don't have to say it. I know. But he is a hired gun, which means that he started started with the group as someone who was being paid to be there as kind of like defense. And he's, big and strong, and he's wields melee weapons, but he also has like a bowcaster and everything. And his thing is he's in debt with the Black Sun, so he's always having to deal with that and having to, pay that money back to them. And the Black Sun are like a criminal syndicate. So that's not a good thing to be in debt with. And as he's been with the party, he's formed bonds and everything, and he's not, he's no longer there for the money, and he's there for his friendship, which is really cool. And then you have Gand, which is our Gand bounty hunter. Gand is both his name and his species. So a Gand is kind of like it's like a bug people. If you ever played SWTOR, Sergeant Yoon from the Trooper story is a Gand. And the thing with them is they're really spiritual, and they don't have names until they earn their names. So Gand, our bounty hunter, hasn't earned his name yet, and he's kind of on a quest to do so. But his, being a bounty hunter and also being very spiritual, it's interesting because of the way he prepares for everything and the way that he wants to, bring a name to himself and to his people. So he's always out to do that. He's always out to prove something, and it makes for some interesting dialogue. And then you have our scoundrel, our smuggler scoundrel. Scoundrel's the sub-specialization of his class, Alasktar, which is a Twi'lek. And he's kind of the smooth talker, gunslinger type character. He does a lot of the communications with the party, whether it be through getting missions and whatnot, or piloting the ship to the places they need to be. He's that kind of character. He's your Han Solo. Then we have Wax, which is our droid, and Wax is actually a shorter name of his full name, which is Wax, or W-AX01UM, which is a droid designation. And he's a technician, so he kind of build things, and he makes like weapons and weapon modifications and little tiny droids called remotes that can go out and like protect his party or do like basic commands and everything. You could kind of think of him as the engineer from Mass Effect. He's got a little bit of that going on, and his character is really quite fun because he doesn't have a memory of what happened before. He kind of starts with a recent wiping of his memory, isn't sure what happened in his past character's life, which is fun because we get to create it as we go, and I'll get into that as we have been doing so since we started. And then finally we have Doc, which full name is Doc Tala. He's another Twi'lek, but he's a colonist, and his subspecialization is doctor. So we picked him up later on. We didn't start with him, and he's kind of the group's healer. And I'll also get into his story later, but basically he started the adventure wanting to prove something to his family. His family never really believed in him, and he's out to prove that he is a person that can be respected and everything. So he's out to go do that, and that's how he starts on the adventure. So the start of our story began with the group, all of them except Doc. So Galen, who was the human who ended up leaving, they all started on Tatooine working for a Hutt to pay off their ship. They had just gotten a ship from the Hutts, but they were in debt to them, so they were trying to work the debt off by doing jobs for this Hutt. And they got a YT 1300 cruiser, which is the Millennium Falcon, if you don't know. They later named it the Halcyon once they kind of learned of what the ship was capable of, and that, this is kind of going to be our home in space, because they got one last real job from this Hutt, which was to go and find this guy out in the desert named Orin. Upon getting the quest from this Hutt, one of the advisors to the Hutt secretly pulled Alasktar into another room and basically told him, hey, if you find this guy, bring him to me, and I'll pay you way more than what the Hutt will, but don't let him know that. And as they go out into the desert, they're kind of debating whether or not they should bring him to the Hutt or bring him to the guy. They find the Orin out in the desert, and he's basically passed out in his bed as they sneak into his place. And with some pretty good rolls, they manage to not die to the guy, as he was quite a gunslinger himself. But they end up knocking him out. After learning a little bit of information and searching out his place, they find like an X-wing in a hidden hangar that was really locked down, and it was lucky for them to actually even to get into it. And then they found a mysterious cube. They also found a few other surveying equipment within there. They could gather that the guy was spying on the Hutt, and after talking to him and bringing him awake, they find out that he was working with the Resistance, which is a new thing in the galaxy at this point, trying to combat the new First Order. And what ends up happening is they go to take Orin to this guy who requested him rather than the Hutt. And once they do that, they get paid for their job, but are suddenly ambushed by the First Order, as the Hutt was secretly working with the First Order, which is why the guy was spying on the Hutt. So the First Order shows up. They barely get away with their lives, but unfortunately they lose both Orin, the guy they found, and the guy that they were turning Orin into on their way onto their ship. They manage to save Orin's body, so they still have the body with them, and they go to, after being chased down by TIE fighters and barely managing to get off Tatooine, they go to Dakar after learning that that's where he was from. And they find a Resistance base and basically give the body back to the Resistance. The Resistance is really hesitant with them because they don't know why that these people kind of are interacting with them. But eventually they come to the conclusion that they may work with the Resistance in the future, so they are fairly friendly. After that, the group is looking for work, so they go to Ryloth, which is the Twi'lek homeworld, which is fairly close by. And they manage to meet a woman who isn't a part of the spice trade. So spice is it's a drug that is made from the Ryloth ore, basically. So she isn't involved in any of that, and they kind of like that. Okay, she's not super dirty, so we want to work with her, but they need to gain her trust. So they go out looking for work on the planet, which she sends them to like a temple to go find some of her people. And it's there that they, in this adventure, meet Doc, which is their healer. And they kind of learn about his story about being not wanted by his family anymore. And he joins the party. They eventually finish the fairly, mundane mission on the planet and end up taking off to go to Arcanus because a bounty hunter happened upon their ship looking for Alask Tar, because in his past, he went and betrayed one of his old groups that he was with. So he was in a very similar group to what he is now, except he betrayed them for the money during a heist, and they all got arrested. He presumed that most of them were dead, but most of them actually ended up getting arrested. And one of them, the leader of the group now, has sent a bounty hunter to try to find these guys. So they go to Arcanus, which is the last known place of the guy who hired the bounty hunter, and they do a couple missions on the planet, trying to get information out of one of the guys there named Matin Startalon. And throughout their little adventure, they figure out that the guy that Alask is looking for is on Ord Mantell. So they're just like on this goose chase. They end up going to Ord Mantell and doing quite a few things there to get recognition. But in that process, they find out that the Great Hunt is about to happen, which is a giant bounty hunter event, which if you played SWTOR, you know about. And the bounty hunter, Gand, decides that this will be the thing that gets him his name and brings honor to his people. And it's here that things start getting really interesting, because they do a couple bounties on the planet to kind of prove their worth to the Mandalorians before they enter the Great Hunt. And upon doing all this, they find out that Frederick Reed, which is the guy that Alask is looking for, his kind of old companion that he betrayed, is on the planet. And in fact, they've been like hunted the entire time that they've been on the planet, and they've been being watched by a woman named Vesa, who is part of Frederick's crew, which we later find out is named the Black Devils. And the Black Devils are a merc group who have been going throughout the galaxy doing some really weird stuff, which I'll get to. But they find out that they're on the planet, and Alask decides to go and confront him. And after a fairly short conversation that leads directly into combat, they end up killing the entire group of the Black Devils. But once they do that, they go on the ship and they learn some interesting things, which is that the Black Devils have been working for the First Order since they formed. And they've been doing some menial tasks, but they've also been doing some weird stuff, like going to Sith tombs to find relics to bring them to the First Order. They've been making jumps into unknown space, and it's not just in one spot in the unknown regions, but it's within multiple spots. So it can assume that whatever they're going to out there is on the move. They've also been kidnapping some people like Matin Startalon, one of the guys they met on Arcanus, and bringing him out to the First Order. So they learn all this stuff from the data logs on the ship before the ship, they trigger a self-destruct thing accidentally, and it blows up. So they're in this weird situation of they just found out that all this stuff is going on with his old crew, and the entire time that the old crew was stalking Alask was because of the events on Tatooine, and that they're actually wanted by the First Order, and the First Order is trying to hunt them down, mostly because they kind of screwed up their mission on Tatooine that the First Order was trying to do. So with that, the group finally kind of gets everything together, decides that they want to go investigate the next stuff that the Black Devils were working on, which they were on some random planet that they have never heard of, which was Moraband, which turns out to be Korriban. Again, if you've played any of the old Republic stuff, you know that that's an old Sith planet. So they go there to investigate what the heck the devils were doing, the Black Devils were doing there, and they find a Sith tomb. And upon going through the tomb and kind of figuring their way out through it, which had a lot of puzzles, they actually get into the main chamber where an ancient Force ghost, is residing. And it ends up, through some combat, actually secretly possessing Doc, the doctor of the group, though they don't find that out until they get back on the ship. Each of the different players on their way back to Ord Mantell didn't talk about what happened on the planet. They all experienced different nightmares on their way back to Ord Mantell, and some weird stuff started happening. So time would freeze, and this Force Ghost would show up and talk to them and try to corrupt them, and generally was trying to turn the party against each other and try to kill them all, as, the Force Ghost was actually trying to possess the body of Doc, but was needing the rest of the group not to be around in order to do that. We also learn that Doc has Force powers, and is, trying to explore and learn what that is, because the Force is not something that necessarily exists in the time before the Force Awakens. You see in the movie that Luke Skywalker is a myth, and there's all this talk of what happened at the Death Star, and the Sith and the Jedi are all like made up, basically. So the players also believe that the Force is made up, and then suddenly Doc is exhibiting these weird powers, and they're all weirded out by it. They have this Force Ghost haunting them, and they have to go and start the Great Hunt. Their first hunt comes in, and they're still dealing with all this Force Ghost stuff. They manage to have a very messy bounty hunt against another bounty hunter called Talon, and that person, she is really good at sneaking around and everything, and the players learn for the first time that, like, oh, this Great Hunt thing is going to be very difficult, and they almost managed to not make it through their first hunt in the Great Hunt, but they eventually do, and the bounty hunter himself is told by their huntsmaster named Vex that he needs to kind of train with her in the meantime, while the rest of the party kind of goes out and does other stuff, so that they're prepared for the next bounty, because they did not do very well. And it's with this that Doc and Wax learn that they're actually kind of tied together. So Wax the droid, his memories that he forgot, actually tie all the way back to the Old Republic. So he's been around longer than he thought he did. And there's something weird going on with the Force Ghost telling him that Wax is the only one that can train Doc. And we find out slowly that possibly that the Force Ghost was friends with Wax, and that's how he knows that all. So Wax is now on this journey to find his memories, while Gand is training on Ord Mantell to kind of become a better bounty hunter. So they go, back to Arcanus, and they try to find these memories from the old Empire archives, but they're not there, and they're currently on this journey to try to restore Wax's memories, to train Doc in the ways of the Force, and also to restore some ancient artifacts that they found within the tomb, all whilst being hunted by the First Order, who have now been seen on Ord Mantell, as there are a few stormtroopers that have been spotted by the group on Ord Mantell secretly. It's clear that the First Order is not wanting to be seen. They're kind of hiding, and they're trying to manipulate the Shadow Collective and the Black Sun on the planet to their will. So it's a really interesting story, but that catches you up with everything that's going on right now. And the story arc that I have planned is just so freaking cool for what I plan on having the party go through. I can't wait for them to do that. But by the time that we kind of learn of Wax's memories and everything, the series will have already started. So, I'll have to catch you guys up on that. And the way that we do that for the series is we'll do a video series beforehand to kind of catch you up on the story of each of the characters and everything that's happened in great detail, because I was just kind of like going very broad on all that to catch you up what's happened in just a few months. And I'm really excited to where the story goes, but I'm even more excited to share it with people. So how would this look like in the form of a series on the channel? Well, framing is really key, actually, for a video. And the thing that I mentioned earlier is that many of us will be in the same spot. So we will have physical players on an actual tabletop, though we will still use Roll20, which is an online app, which is really, really good. I would highly suggest it. And we use that for all of our dice rolls, because the dice for this Star Wars rule set, they're not your typical dice. They're actually really strange. And the API built into Roll20 works really well for resolving dice and everything, because, like I said, they have some interesting mechanics there, but they're really cool. So this is kind of like a mock-up of what the framing would look like. The Cam 1 would be the players. So you would have 3 of the players there, like at a tabletop, or like around a table, so that they're able to kind of talk to each other. But they would also be able to see off screen the other two players that are not there. So webcam 1 and webcam 2 would be utilizing the soon to be added feature of video chat to Discord. So you guys would see just recorded cameras from the perspective of framing. So the technical stuff aside, it basically would just be on screen for you to see that. And then the GM, which would be me, would have my own camera, but I would be in the same room as camera 1. So I would be across from the people on camera 1 with my own camera. They would have theirs, so it'd be more of a wide shot, which is why it's long. And then you would have camera 1 and camera 2 as the off-screen people, the people who don't live in the same spot, and thus would need to basically Skype in, terms aside. So this would be your basic camera setup, and this would probably change, but this would just kind of give you an idea of like what you would generally see. Then if we needed to, make a dice roll, we would have to change up the framing. So again, you would have all the cameras to be able to see the players and the reactions and the interactions, but then you would also have this new frame, which would be the Roll20 dice rolling thing. So you would see all the dice rolls that pop up there, and all the players on Cam 1 would have tablets, so it wouldn't be like they're in front of computers, despite the fact that we're playing over Roll20. They would have tablets to make their rolls, so it wouldn't obstruct the view at all or, distract from the scene. So you would have all the rolls on Roll20 on the right there, but if you needed to see the battle maps, because I do make some, which are really cool, on Roll20 and see like combat, so when we're actually in combat or we're moving around and sneaking and doing like missions and everything, you would have this screen, which basically is just an added map thing. Some of the cameras would be shrunk down because you gotta have screen space. I don't know. This is definitely not final on this, but you get kind of the idea of how this would all frame out and how the framing would switch based on what was going on in the story. If it was using, or if it was more of like interaction between players, we would have the first frame. If it was more of a battle, we would have this one, so on and so forth. So you kind of get the idea of how that would work. Now, the issue that we're running into now is me deciding whether or not this would be live streamed or recorded. If it's recorded, I can add a lot more stuff to it. If it's live streamed, it would be live, which is interesting. And that's the way the Critical Role does it. And then they upload it later, which is how we would do it. But I'm kind of jumping back and forth between whether or not it would be live streamed or live. So that would be something that I also want to gauge interest on. So if you guys, would let me know which of the two you would rather see. Would you rather see it uploaded in episode form, or would you rather see it live streamed and then uploaded all as 1 or 2 chunks, which would be about 3 hours of a session? Either way, what all of this boils down to is it's going to take some time, regardless, because we need to, get a camera setups rather. We need to have the Discord update happen, so we have video chats. We're not using Skype, which is terrible. Technically speaking, the way that you would set it up in the room is you would have the microphone pointed at the group of 3, and then another microphone pointed at the GM, and then you would have speakers in between that, so pointing at the players and the GM, so we could hear the other players. We could hear the music playing as would be started to kind of set battle music and stuff like that, or more creepy moments, having like creepy music going or sound effects, stuff like that. So those speakers wouldn't actually be picked up by the microphones. So that's how the physicality of all that works. So you would still have crystal clear sound for the players and everything, but the players would also have sound of the 2 remote players, of what we'll call them. And the remote players will basically be seeing what you guys are, except just in camera form. They wouldn't have like the Roll20 stuff on their screen or anything like that, because they'll have another window open that has all that, and they'd be moving their own characters, dealing with that live. So it's an interesting way to go about it, because speaking of what is going on in this kind of realm of series on YouTube and on Twitch, and the progression of all that, is that you either have all physical players, or you typically have all online players. So you're either doing it physically with a physical map, or you're doing it online with Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and stuff like that. So it's interesting to have a combination of the two, but I think we can make it work. I know technically how to take care of it, but the process of getting there involves getting a hold of Fantasy Flight to get permission to use the rule sets, which I know that they just released a Force Awakens rule set, which is interesting, which basically is just the characters and how they would look within the system, which is fine. But generally speaking, you would also you would use some of that, despite the fact that we're using, at this point, we're not just using Edge of the Empire stuff. We're actually using Age of Rebellion and Force and Destiny. So we've opened it up. So if we ever have a character die, they can roll a class from any of the rule sets out there from Fantasy Flight. But again, we would need to get permission from them. There's some licensing things that would have to get taken care of with Disney, which should be fairly easy considering I'm with Maker Studios, and Maker Studios is owned by Disney, so I think I could work something out. There's just a lot of different stuff that would end up happening with this. And in order to get it going, I need to gauge interest. Are you interested in something like this? You know, if you haven't watched anything like this, I would suggest going and watching Critical Role because it's really good. They are much better than what we will be. But at the same time, you know, I kind of want to do this because I think it's really cool. All of the players want to do it because they like the idea of it being a series and having people invested in it because they're all invested in the game regardless. And we're going to continue playing regardless of if you guys want this as a series or not because it's really good and it's really fun. So let us know if this is something you want to see, if you have any suggestions or if you have any ideas for whether it should be live streamed or recorded and stuff like that. I think it'll be really fun. But again, I need to know like now of what the interest is so that way I can kind of get started on the process. Because the process will be quite long, but once it gets together, it'll be really, really cool. With all that being said, leave your comments seriously in the comments below because I need to know what you guys think, and again, if you guys have any suggestions. But with all of that, me droning on and on for like over 30 minutes. Hopefully, I'll have news whether or not this will become a series sometime soon. And we shall see you guys next time.